Think DC is dead in August? Well, think again. All of your out-of-town friends going to Paris for the summer are going to have major FOMO because Chevy Chase Main Street is throwing the party of the summer. Join District Bridges August 16th for Sips and Snacks, Last Sip Standing, a neighborhood food and drink crawl featuring 5 Chevy Chase favorites like Little Beast and Opal. $40 gets you live music, a free drink, and snacks at every stop. To learn more and get your tickets, head to districtbridges.org/events.
Remember that amazing cafe you discovered last summer or that perfect hiking spot you heard about? With the Overlook mobile app, you can create personalized lists of places you've been and want to go and always see everything on a map. Share your favorite hidden gems with family and friends or keep your secret spots private for you. The best part, there are no ads cluttering your list and no one is selling your interest to travel data. Download the free app at overlookmaps.com and check out overlookmaps.com/DC to see some CityCast lists. On a map and in your pocket. Overlookmaps.com, collect and share the places that matter to you.
Today on CityCast DC, I'm one of those people who always needs to find a bathroom immediately whenever I'm out. But in DC, that's easier said than done. You might have noticed those shiny new Throne public bathrooms popping up across the city. They're a high-tech toilet startup from a company called Throne Labs, but they are just the beginning. Marcie Bernbaum, a local human rights advocate, says DC's lack of public restrooms is not just inconvenient, it's a human rights issue. Today's Tuesday, August 5th. I'm Bridget Todd, and here's what DC is talking about. Marcie, thank you so much for being here. This is an issue that is near and dear to me because almost every time I have to go to the bathroom when I'm out and about in public, it is some kind of a bathroom emergency. This is a known thing with my friends. So I want to start with a kind of obvious question. Why should we have public restrooms in the first place?
That is a really good question. Public restrooms are critical for personal and public health. And you just gave a good example. When you have to go, you have to go. And many people cannot wait when they need to go. You, for example, you're a good example. You're a woman.
Yes.
And so all women tend to hold urine too often. And that leads to UTIs, which can lead to kidney problems. So you are one example of a bathroom challenge person. Everybody has to urinate and defecate. That's clear. But many people really, when there's an urgent need, they have to go. So you have little kids who have small bladders and they're out. When that kid has to go, they have to go. Somebody who is pregnant, of course, the bladder is limited. Many people take blood pressure medication, which is a diuretic. And indeed, people will not even leave their houses if they are afraid they won't find a restroom. People with diabetes, let me give you a good example. One of my colleagues has diabetes, and with his medications, when he has to go, he has often had accidents because he hasn't been able to get to a restroom in time. And then not to think of all the people who are living outside who are often limited with access to restrooms or at night. But I think a really important point here, and something that people may not be aware of, is that the United Nations several years ago, on July 28, 2010, the General Assembly came up with a resolution that declared safe and clean drinking water and sanitation a human right essential to the full enjoyment of life and all other human rights. So access to a public restroom is critical.
As someone who has tried to navigate this myself, I feel like I have an anecdotal answer, but I got to ask the expert here. Does DC have real functioning public restrooms?
Yes, but very few. We did a study a number of years ago and in 5 areas of DC, which have a large commercial concentration of commercial areas, with, for example, Georgetown, K Street Corridor, DuPont Circle, and others. And there were hardly any restrooms, and people had to walk a long time. There have been some improvements, but if you look at Washington, D.C. against other cities, DC, among cities in the United States, is registered as very low. So we have few public restrooms. And one of the big issues is that businesses are increasingly denying restroom access to people that don't purchase something. We did a study in 2015, 16, and 17, and we went into 85 restrooms in 5 areas of town and found that half let people in, anybody in. 2 years later, only 11% let people in. And as you walk around, most businesses have customers only. We are the nation's capital. You would think that for visitors coming from outside of the country, from others, that they would expect to find restrooms, and there are hardly any, and people don't know where they are. There are some steps being taken, as we'll discuss, through the thrones that are beginning to make things look like we might be going in the right direction, but there are a few buts.
And the thrones are those new high-tech public restrooms. I mean, this wasn't even that long ago. I had to scam my way into using a bathroom by going into a restaurant and telling the hostess, oh, I'm meeting someone here that I think is here already, and then just running to use the bathroom and then being like, oh, I guess they weren't here, bye. But it shouldn't be that way because, as you said, this is a function of being a human. Everybody has to go to the bathroom. It's nothing shameful. And the idea that in a city like DC, so many visitors from all over the country or from all over the world come here and we don't have public bathrooms. When I go to Paris, when I go to other big cities, there are public bathrooms that are really visible and really obvious for folks to use.
You're absolutely right. And to make things even a little bit more complicated, I don't know what the color of your skin is. I am Caucasian. In all truth, if I need to use a restroom and it says customers only, chances are they might let me in. But we have many people in this city that come from many other cultures and backgrounds, dress in many ways. We did a study a few years ago where we went into a series of restrooms, and a colleague of mine who was homeless, we made him look really scrunchy, went in and asked to use restrooms. And it was really interesting. People, when looking at him, would have an excuse that maybe it wasn't available. And we went into Clyde's in Gallery Place. And it's a fancy restaurant, right? There was somebody there at the reception, and I asked to use the restroom, and they said, no problems. My friend Robert went in, and he was told that he was denied access. So we decided to try again. The next day we went, there was somebody else on duty, and guess what? They let both of us in. So that's another issue. People look at you, and those were two different people, and those two different people had different opinions. So it's really up to whoever is there to decide, okay, maybe we'll let you come in even though we don't have restrooms open to the public, or no, we don't like the way you look. Sorry, not available.
I am a Black woman, so this is not surprising to me to hear at all. However, I think it's one of those issues where because establishments want to limit, like, everybody is losing because of these policies. Everybody loses out when there are not bathrooms and especially when their enforcement is so unequal based on these arbitrary qualities.
Absolutely. Well, let me tell you who else loses out. Businesses. Businesses benefit, and there's data that shows this, and we found this with the throne, that if there is a public restroom nearby, two things will happen. One is people who would generally not leave their house to go shopping, to go to a park or other because they can't find a restroom, knowing there is a public restroom, they will come, and they're more apt to shop. In this, studies have shown that when there's a restroom nearby, there's less urination and defecation in front of the business, and many fewer people actually come to ask to use the restroom. So restrooms not only benefit us as individuals, they benefit business and they benefit our economy. As you said, we had 25 million visitors come in 2023, and if they are comfortable going to areas of the town that are not restrooms, they won't purchase in the economy. As you said, everybody benefits.
Hey, when someone else's negligence changes your life forever, figuring out what to do next can feel overwhelming. You need lawyers who won't back down. The NACE Law Group has been winning serious injury and wrongful death cases in D.C. for decades. They don't just settle, they fight for real justice, and they're not afraid to take cases to court to get it. You might remember them as Paulson and Nace. It's the same trusted lawyers, just a new name. If you need someone in your corner, reach out to NACE Law Group for a free, no-obligation consultation. Visit WashingtonDCInjuryLawyers.com or call 202-463-1999. That's 202-463-1999.
Hold up, DC foodies. You're still ordering the same boring takeout? It is time to wake up those taste buds and explore DC's unique and delicious food scene. Metropolitan Washington Restaurant Week is bringing the eats from August 18th through the 24th at hundreds of locations across the DMV. Check out that new Thai fusion spot or that burger joint you've been meaning to try. There's something for everyone. Enjoy a 3-course lunch, dinner, or DC's favorite, brunch, at a discounted flat rate as low as $25. If you've ever eaten out in DC, you already know that it's an absolute steal. Many locations are also offering cocktail and wine pairings to further elevate your dining experience. Restaurant Week is presented by the Restaurant Association of Metropolitan Washington and Events DC. Visit rwdmv.com to see the full list of participating restaurants, peruse the menus, and book your reservations. I had my first experience with a throne recently. I was at a street festival, and they had a porta potty, which there was no line for, and then they had a throne, which there was a bit of a line for. I waited for the throne. It was such a good experience. It was very clean. It was like kind of space-aged. What are your thoughts on those throne lab restrooms that have popped up across the city?
When we started our advocacy, because our advocacy in a bill that became law, we were looking at another model, which is used in a variety of places around the United States, called the Portland Loo. Throne DC came and chose Washington as its base for experimenting and trying with Throne because of our advocacy here. The Throne really is quite incredible. It functions as a porta potty does, so that you can pick it up and move it, which is great. So if you put it someplace and there are problems, you just move it elsewhere because they deal with all the waste, etc. But what makes the Thrones unique is it's a very nice experience. First of all, there's no touch. You either look at a QR code or put in a text, and the door opens, you go in, you sit, use the restroom, and lo and behold, without touching anything, toilet paper comes out. You then go to wash your hands, and without having any touching, the water comes out, the soap comes out, the paper, and then you leave the restroom and automatically you wave your hand and leave.
So I do want to have a follow-up on that, because one of the biggest arguments against public restrooms that I hear are people saying, oh, people would use them for drugs or for sex. People who are experiencing homelessness might use them for reasons they are not designed for. What do you say to people who say that?
This is really important because many problems with public restrooms in other cities and makes people leery of them is that they're used for illicit purposes. And in the case of the Throne, they know if somebody's in there too long. I can give you an interesting example. When they were piloting it several years ago, they found one day that every day at a certain time, the Throne was in use for a long period of time. So somebody came and visited, and sure enough, there were a bunch of high school kids that were getting drugs. What did they do? They just canceled their telephone. And I think recent data on the Thrones, there are 6 that were put in place a year ago, they track everything very carefully. There have been no instances of use for inappropriate purposes, which is quite extraordinary. If somebody puts graffiti up, they immediately cover it. So they're on top of what's happening. It's really been very impressive. They have found that over the course of the last year that the Thrones have been in, there have been 0 instances where there's been need for law enforcement intervention, which would mean being used for inappropriate purposes. Also, they now have a 10-minute limit. So that's quite extraordinary because you were right. In many other cities, even the fancy restrooms by Delacroix, while they're closed, they can be used inappropriately. And the Thrones, the data that they have found is 92% of the people rated the Throne as good or great. 50% of the businesses that were near the Throne reported a reduced operational burden of people coming in. and a noticed decrease in defecation. And the throne, I might say, here in D.C. it began, and we have now actually 6 that are financed for the government and 2 by a bid. And in the last year, thrones have been put up in cities all around the United States with great success. So, yeah, it's a very interesting option. I'm not sure it's the be-all and end-all, but it's the beginning of a whole new approach to public restrooms, which is very high-tech. And I think the beauty of the throne, and I wouldn't say this if I didn't believe it, I'm somebody who's very critical and has looked at it, is they're constantly improving. They're constantly looking at ways to make it better. And that is very, very important. So we're hopeful. We're hopeful. And I guess you are aware that in the FY26 budget, there will be an increase in number of thrones. And this in itself is interesting news. We now have several other DC council members who are asking to have thrones in their districts. For example, Ward 6, Charles Allen, Ward 7, Felder, Ward 2, Pinto, are now providing their own financing to have thrones in their areas. The money that goes into the thrones comes from the Department of Public Works. And there's an interesting story there if you'd like to hear it.
Sure.
Okay, well, when we began this process as advocates, I was part of a group of homeless individuals. I'm retired from USAID, and I wanted to have experience collaborating alongside people experiencing homelessness. Somebody came one day and said there were no bathrooms, something I had never thought of. I looked at options. The next thing, I was there just to observe and learn. I was thrown into doing a feasibility study. So we went out, we documented the need for restrooms by going to different areas. So ours has been a research base, and we received assistance in doing professional interviews. And one of our first interviews was Brianna Doe, who had recently become the Ward 1 DC councilor. And 2 weeks after we gave the presentation, we received a call, and she said she would like to introduce a law based on our experience and research, or a bill. And so we worked very, very hard, thousands of hours to get approval. The bill was passed and became law. And unfortunately, we ran into serious problems then, which is an important message I'd like to give, which is leadership is critical. There wasn't a lot of enthusiasm on part of the leadership in D.C. to provide financing, even though it was a law. So Brianna Doe and Councilmember White put money into the budget. There was an original pilot that was supposed to be done. And that didn't work because senior management decided that they would stop financing even though funds were available in the budget. And so Brianna Doe, of her own initiative, having recently become the chair over the Department of Public Works, got the director of Public Works to put in funds for public restrooms. So we have these restrooms today thanks to Brianna. And we are waiting. We are hoping that the mayor is going to come on board. Recently, as you're probably aware, the thrones were suddenly closed and people were very upset. Now you have not us as advocates, but users saying, we're used to coming to DuPont Circle. We're used to going to other places. We need it urgently. And there was an article in the Washington Post several weeks ago that indicated that based on these concerns, it looked like the mayor was going to be putting funding in. This was to cover the thrones to the end of fiscal year 25. It's different for 26. And we were all thrilled. And we do hope that she's going to come around and see that this can be very beneficial for her city, for her economy. So we're hopeful that she will come on board.
This episode is brought to you by Nordstrom. Summer's almost out and fall's calling. Luckily, Nordstrom has everything you need for the season ahead, all under $100. Discover new arrivals from your favorite brands like Mango, Princess Polly, Wave, Free People, BDG, and more. Whether you're planning a last-minute getaway, heading back to class, or refreshing your office looks, you'll find the latest trends and beauty must-haves without breaking your budget. It's easy, too, with free shipping, free returns, and in-store order pickup. Shop today, in stores, and at Nordstrom.com.
Eczema isn't always obvious, but it's real. And so is the relief from Ebglyss. After an initial dosing phase, about 4 in 10 people taking Ebglyss achieved itch relief and clear or almost clear skin at 16 weeks. And most of those people maintain skin that's still more clear at 1 year with monthly dosing.
Ebglyss, lebrikizumab LBKZ, a 250 milligram per 2 milliliter injection, is a prescription medicine used to treat adults and children 12 years of age and older who weigh at least 88 pounds or 40 kilograms with moderate to severe eczema, also called atopic dermatitis, that is not well controlled with prescription therapies used on the skin or topicals, or who cannot use topical therapies. Ebglyss can be used with or without topical corticosteroids. Don't use if you're allergic to Ebglyss. Allergic reactions can occur that can be severe. Eye problems can occur. Tell your doctor if you have new or worsening eye problems. You should not receive a live vaccine when treated with Ebglyss. Before starting Ebglyss, tell your doctor if you have a parasitic infection.
Searching for real relief? Ask your doctor about Ebglyss and visit ebglyss.lilly.com or call 1-800-LILY-RX or 1-800-545-5979.
I mean, I do think it sounds like there is definitely interest in keeping thrones in the city and making sure they're funded and open, but they're not the only public restrooms in the city. So I'm wondering, when it comes to non-throne public restrooms in DC, do they have safeguards in place to make sure that those bathrooms are clean and orderly and being used the way they're supposed to be used? The thrones, I agree, it seems like they've got it figured out.
I'm a little bit behind on this. I was very active in this up until a couple of years ago. The restrooms that we went and visited varied. There was a restroom in Lafayette Park near the White House, which was not maintained well and is now closed down. There were restrooms that you could use at Jefferson and Lincoln Memorials, but again, issues with their maintenance and off the beaten track in the middle of the night. One of the key things that is critical is the Department of General Services is responsible for the maintenance. And there are restrooms in community centers and others. I don't mean to be inappropriate here because I'm not up to date, but several years ago, we found there were serious issues with GGSs coming at appropriate times to keep the restrooms clean. And this is the advantage, by the way, of the throne, is you don't have to depend on somebody else. They do it. So I would say I don't really know, but the track record hasn't been great.
What are your thoughts on those bathrooms where you have to pay a quarter to get into? They're not free, but, I was in Paris recently and they have those paid toilets. What are your thoughts on those?
It is an option, and I have had the same experience in England and Germany and et cetera. I think I personally would, as long as the amount of money is minimal, if this is something that businesses can put in place that will benefit, yes. I would hope, however, that it wouldn't totally eclipse restrooms like the throne. So in the case of the throne, which argues for it, some people say, what about the people who are homeless? They don't have a telephone. They can't get in because you need a phone. And to their credit, Throne Labs has gone ahead and made these little things accessible so that different organizations that support the homeless can get in. So I think in principle, it's a good idea. And we did have this in years past. I would hope it would not be exclusive, that there would also be restaurants that are available for free. But why not?
Why not? I mean, why do we have so many issues in this city. Why do you feel that this should be a top priority? I am with you, but I'm sure someone is listening and thinking, bathrooms, big deal.
Well, let's go back to why we need to use bathrooms. They're critical for personal and public health. So look at the instances. You're one of them. Oh, the other is we who are older. I'm 76 years old. Our bladders get smaller. So it's critical for us to be able to have access to restrooms when we need them, especially those who are restroom challenged. And then there's the public health issues. Urination outside, defecation. There have been experiences, for example, in California, where there was hepatitis A germs found in fecal matter. It's just critical, as the United Nations said, the most important element for health among all human rights is access to water and clean, safe restroom.
What do you see as the future of public restroom availability in DC?
I think a lot's going to depend on leadership. So let's take a look at what has happened, just using Throne as an example. A little over a year ago, was when Throne began piloting. And today, within the last year, Los Angeles, look at the number of thrones that have been established. Ann Arbor, Michigan has 8 thrones just in the last year. East Bay, for bus operators has 9. The LA Metro has already installed 25 thrones with plans to have 64 in the next 3 years. How did this happen so quickly? Why did it take us so long, starting with our advocacy in 2015, to not have action for several years? It all boils down to leadership and the commitment of leadership that this is important.
Marcie, thank you so much for being such a leader on this issue and for being here today.
My pleasure.
Today, we've got a couple of shout-outs from CityCast DC neighbors. Stephanie A. loves the beer, staff, vibes, and the run club at Dacha Beer Garden in Shaw. Caitlin F. says, if you've never been to Heat to Spot in Parkview, go immediately, then get the Ethiopian breakfast. I totally agree, Caitlin. And Haley G. wants to shout out the work that DC Acts Local 1927 is doing expanding unions and union protections to the charter schools in DC. Thanks, Stephanie, Caitlin, and Haley. Want to share your favorite local business or nonprofit on the podcast? Become a CityCast DC neighbor and send us your shout out, and I will read it right here. Join today at membership.citycast.fm. That's membership.citycast.fm. That's all for today here on CityCast DC. If you enjoyed the show, share it with your bathroom emergency friend. You can rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our morning newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with even more news from around the city. Talk to you then.